Well, welcome to the Hill, Mars Hill, that is, here in Naptown. To you old young people, that's what we used to call it when coming up in the 60s and the 70s. That's when I started calling it that. That was called Naptown. I guess the nap means not sleepy nap, which is kind of cool, but the nap means Indianapolis. You get it? Indianapolis, Naptown. That's where that comes from. And I like the hill because from the hill, you can see everything from the hill. And I live in Mars Hill. Now, why? Now, I don't live on Mars, so you can get that out of your mind. But I like saying the hill. It sounds cool. From the hill, you know. People die on the hill. People live on the hill. And rich people love the hills. And so do hillbillies, too. And I think I'm the latter one. I'm a glorified hillbilly from Arkansas. By no choice of my own, my family moved up here in Indianapolis a long time ago. Then I left and I come back. I can't get rid of this place. So I guess I'm stuck like Chuck. So anyway, let me get you here on Facebook. You can dial in here. And, whoops, that's not right. There you go there. Okay. Oh, here we are. Here you are. I always have to do this manually. It's a real drag. Change. And voila. Voila, y'all. Here I am again over here. Well, I just love this little Cinemaker app. And where I'm seeing you through my iPad 9. It was real cool how I got this. My wife and I, when we decide on things, we both have to sign off on it. That's what a marriage is. Everybody's signing off on something. Sometimes we don't agree on certain things at certain times. Let me get a good cup of coffee. Have you had yours yet? I'm on my second cup. Oh boy, that's good stuff. I like the dark roast, man. I like the dark roast. So one day I'm in there talking to the wife, and I said, man, we just got our phones updated, and we had Androids, and I decided I would go with Apple. It didn't cost a heck of a lot. My wife didn't want to get a new phone when we could, so I did. So I chose an Apple phone, and I got on it, and then this is just a little short story before I get started. If you want to get your Bibles out, we're going to be in Genesis 39, and we're going to be scouting out. Ta-da! I see here. It's all out of focus. How did that happen? Okay. All righty. Yeah. Yeah, let's bring it up here and see what we can do. That'll change. Well, son of a gun. Now, how did that happen? Well, let me pull it off and see what occurred here. Okay. Director. Turning that off. I'm going back. Let's see now. Is it? Okay. Okay. See? All right. So I'm slipping it up in here. All right. There it is. Kinda. There. Moving it over a little bit. Okay. I'll get me over here a little bit. Okay. But anyway. So when I went over to get my to T-Mobile, it's down here at the Marwood Shopping Center at the Kroger, I go in there and I get my phone, and I'm real happy with it. I bring it back, show it to the wife, and then the next day I'm thinking, man, I wish I had me one of those iPads, because what I'm trying to do is get what I got here, the multi-camera thing. This was long before. It's long before this baby you're talking to here, before this ministry got born here on this internet. And the conversation come up, and I mentioned the iPad, and lo and behold, when I mentioned it, she didn't adamantly reject. She says, okay. I couldn't believe it. I said, man, I better get down there and get this while she's got the green light on. So I went down there and I got it. I come in here, then I had to learn it. If you don't know, Apple does a lot of things different from Android. And so I had to learn like everything else. If you haven't started in yet with the new technology and stuff, me being an old guy, I had to relearn a lot of things and learn some things I didn't know. Then I got into these, trying to get what I call just cameras. You hit it and you turn it back and forth like that, and it'll still play. But at the time, there wasn't a lot of apps that I could record like I am now. But if I hit the little turnaround button, it would stop. So I had to find those apps. I finally found a couple of those. And then I always wanted it where I could get the word on the screen. And so the only way I had at the time was to get the word on the screen in the back camera. This camera here that you're looking at right there, that's my back camera on the iPad. And the only way I could do that and get me in there, I had to have my TV, my monitor, I had to have the camera, and I had to have me all set up in a row like this. So it was a real drag, real drag to do all that. Because if I was over here, I couldn't get the direct angle because I couldn't change angles. So then I got on this Logitech thing. It's a operating system, and that didn't work out because I found out when I got rolling on that for some reason I was getting, they call it RG interference or something like that. This red flag keeps coming up on your camera. Anyway, to make a long story short, I called the cable guys, Xfinity. They come out and found out my cable was all screwed up and I wasn't getting what I was paying for, and I was getting a minimal amount of reception. So I had to wait a long time till they got that straightened out, and then I thought I was good to go, and I started it up, and it was still doing it. I couldn't understand what was going on. It was very frustrating. And so I kept moving on, and I finally come across this app here. It's called Cinemaker. And essentially, what you got to have to get going, they give you 2 free cameras. They'll give you this camera I'm looking at, and they'll give you this camera here, a side view, and it's free. So if you want to get started for your ministry or something like that, it's called Cinemaker, Cinamaker, Cinemaker. And you get the Director Studio. It'll say Director Studio, and that's for your iPad, because you get you at least an iPad 9. You don't need anything better than that. An iPad 9 is cool. So once you get that going, you got to get your regular iPad, your iPhone, because it only works on one operating system. So it all has to be Apple stuff. And you get your iPhone, and then you can buy you a cheap little camera on the internet. This little red boy, this bad boy here, that picks that up, my overhead camera, that picks that up. And so, whoops, sometimes I hit the wrong camera and be looking the wrong way. And so then I started getting all my little things here, this little thing up over here, this overhead thing, and so I could put that on there. Then eventually, so I wanted more than 2 cameras because I wanted to show the Word and myself and at different angles, and of course my overhead camera. So I paid $30 a month for this. It's So it's an investment in you. And it's an investment in me because, so now when I study the Bible this kind of way, this overview I do, then I have you with me alongside of me, and we can go through the questions and answers, which is this baby right here. I need to always show this up because I want everyone to know, there we go, 4,000 question and answers in case it's your first time tuning in. Well, that's a little history about my system. And it also has got other little gadgets called a virtual camera. I haven't got into that yet. And then they have the, I can bring in photographs. I put it up here and you can look at it. But that's that territory I'm not too familiar with, so I'm kind of getting used to it. Right now I'm just kind of getting broken in, used to getting my camera angle straight and all my audio. I had to learn how to, you don't want all the audio on the different cameras because if you do, you're going to get a lot of echo. I had to learn that. And each day I learn a little something. So now I'm feeling it's kind of like riding a bicycle, okay? You get started on the bicycle and you're a little wobbly, but eventually you just jump on the baby and take off, and I'm kind of right there now. But my next phase in this is, for those of you who don't know about me, I play the guitar a little bit, just a little bit, not too good, just enough to get by. And I'm not a big virtuoso or anything. My wife thinks I'm pretty good. But in guitar picking, it's about what level you're on and what kind of music you want to do. And so I've been wanting to get on board with that, but to me, you got to have the right sounding, for me, and I ain't saying for everybody else. I like when I play that it doesn't sound like I'm playing in a can. I want it, and it's a little different when you record online to a device like your iPad or a camera, iCamera or something like that, your Android phone or something. It's different than when you're sitting down and you're listening to it at home or listening to it over an amplifier in your room. It's different. It doesn't record the same because the signal can get too loud, and then it doesn't sound good going through your microphone that you have for your device. So I'm learning to do that. And so that's where I'm going at next. So I'm real happy about that. It gives me something to do as an old man sitting here. And the weather is bad. Now I can have you in my living room right now, and when we're in the kitchen, maybe you're not exactly in the kitchen, but it's to get the thing going. I guess the undercurrent is it's a casual Bible study. It's the casual thing. See, like what I got here? I put this on when I get up, and it's my walk around the apartment shirt. And mostly I don't care much for wearing too many clothes when I'm home. I wear a minimum. I never wear shoes, never wear socks. I guess it's the Arkansas in me. But I'm pretty native, I guess you could say. So when I invite you in this morning and you drop by, just like you were coming over to visit, you know. You knock on the door and say, come on in. They say, what are you doing, Jack? I said, well, I'm getting ready to have my first cup of coffee. Come on in. And then you just pull up a chair here across the table from me. That's the kind of effect I want. It's like Jesus, you know. If Jesus stopped by, what would you do? Well, aside of fainting, that he'd come to your door, you'd invite him in, and it would be very, like a guest. At first, you'd put him in the living room, you know. But pretty soon, the people, your acquaintances who stop by and you put in your living room, when they start to become your friend, you say, forget that. And you just bring them on in, whatever you're doing, if you're cooking or whatever in the morning or some time. And you just bring them in, and they're sitting there telling you about their day, and they're sitting there at the kitchen table to tell you what's going on with them, like good friends. And I like the casual part. For example, if I said I was a minister and I wore a white collar, okay, not that that ain't cool, some religious people do, and you happen to be looking out the window and see me coming, you automatically try to straighten up the house a little bit, or fix your hair, or whatever women do, or stuff like that. And because you see the preacher coming. So, but if you just saw me coming up the sidewalk and you say, that ain't nobody, that's just Jack. That's just Jack. That ain't no preacher. That ain't no this and that. It's just Jack. He's coming over to say hello. Well, I wouldn't feel so taken aback if he would stop by. I'd say, well, it's just Jack. Here's my little story I got with a guest and a friend. A guest comes over and you say to him, hi, would you like some coffee or something? Can I fix you something to eat? You would try to be a good host. Well, the guest keeps coming over. And finally, after so many occasions, it depends on your level of tolerance, pretty soon you stop putting out the dog for him. You stop saying, can I do this for you? Can I do that for you? It's like this boy, we got our next door neighbor, he comes over, young kid, he's a high school kid, and he used to come over and I would offer him little things to eat, before he went to school or something like that, and it was fine. But now when Josh comes over, I just unlock the screen door and he walks back to the kitchen. He says something like, well, what do you got to eat? I said, I don't know, just look in the refrigerator, whatever you find. So I want the look in the refrigerator, whatever you find, feeling coming across. I want the casual dress coming across. I want the Jesus, just Jesus coming to Lazarus' house, not Jesus coming to minister to you in your home. It's like Jesus just stopping by, like he did Lazarus. Lazarus didn't have any titles. He wasn't anybody. He was just somebody Jesus liked to stop by and see you. And that's what I'm trying to portray to you, that I don't know anything about the Bible. I'm just like you guys. I had a start, and I like to grow in grace and the knowledge of the Lord Jesus Christ. And the way that I phrase some things, when you follow me on this Bible bus, as J. Vernon McGee used to say, he'd say, I'm J. Vernon McGee, and get on the Bible bus. And he's still going today, and he died a long time ago. But he starts from a certain chapter, and he moves on, and he just talks about it. Well, that's kind of like what I do here, okay? And I might say something that might offend you, and I don't mean to, but it's just my view. But if you love the Lord, you just throw that over your shoulder and let it go as a fiery dart. Just quench it with your shield of faith, But there might be some things that you didn't know that I could help you with, and then there might be some things we both didn't know, and we didn't know that. If that makes any sense. So it's not, I don't get it right all the time or some of the time, but I get any time, but I get it right some of the time. So if you're not doing anything and you're working around the house, or you're in the big truck like I used to, going down the road, you can just dial me in and we'll just feel like you just might be in your truck or out on work or somewhere, but it's not rocket science or something. You could just come on in the house, and that's where you are now. And then the Bible says where two or more of us are gathered in His name, He's in the midst. So I just wanted to give you that little bit of background and talk to you a little bit. I already used 20 minutes. And as I said before, there we go here. We've been talking about Joseph, and I just left off, and we just went through the drama where Joseph got snatched. He got snatched by his brothers and sisters, and not sisters, his brothers, and they sold him into slavery to a caravan, and Joseph finds himself in Egypt, and he went straight to Potiphar, and he was the head. He had a position in Pharaoh's government, Potiphar did, and so he put Joseph in charge of his house, and he started doing things, and Joseph worked so well that he saw that he could do things very well, so he kept giving him more responsibility. Potiphar did. Potiphar did. And he would do something good here, and this guy's got some sense, even if he is a Hebrew. And so he kept assigning him different places. And Joseph just got blessed Potiphar, and Potiphar started liking him. And so there was just only one problem for Potiphar. His wife, she was a little promiscuous, and she got an eye on Joseph and decided she wanted to have him be intimate with him. So it started out that she was dropping hints, he wasn't picking up on them. Then she directly just says, I just want you to come in here and let's get it on. He wouldn't do it for two reasons. It was his boss's wife right there in the midst. And the main reason was because he didn't want to sin against the Lord. He was God's child, and he reverenced God, and he loved the Lord. And this is really why God picked Joseph out of all these kids, all these 12 sons of Israel, because Joseph was going to use as an example to save the Hebrew race, all of Israel, and probably Egypt too, as we find out. So, as I said before, he was there at the house until one day he came in and she attacked him and grabbed him, and he tore out of her bedroom, and she held on to his cloak, his piece of garment. And so then she told her household servants to say, if you hear that scream and all that commotion, when my husband Potiphar gets back from taking care of business down the road, you just tell him you don't know anything, or that Joseph tried to attack me, the Hebrew slave. And so Potiphar comes in, and she's there, and she's holding the cloak, looking like she's the victim and everything, and she fabricates this big whopping lie that Joseph attacked her, which we know by the Bible he didn't do that. So he went around and took a survey of the servants, and they all signed on with the lie, the false witness. And the next thing you know, we find our beloved Joseph, God's child, on his way to fulfill the prophecy to save the world, or Israel anyway. And his next stop is Pharaoh's prison. So let's pick it up right here. Alrighty. Okay, let me see. All right. Oh, Joseph in Egypt. Here we are down here. Okay. To what office did Potiphar appoint Joseph overseer of his house? Like I was saying. How was God's favor manifested to Joseph in this situation? By everything prospering under his care. Everything Joseph put his hand to, it just started flourishing. But he had to do it. God blessed it. After God blessed it, he worked it. He put his hand to the plow, and voila. Okay. What unjust punishment was suffered by Joseph? And this is where we are now. He was put in prison. So now I don't know if I should read the questions and the answers and go to the scriptures, or the scriptures first. I'll do both. Looks like we've got 19. I'm on what? Yeah, okay, so I'll go halfway. Okay. How did the Lord forsake him? He was with him and showed him mercy. No, did the Lord forsake him? How did the keeper of the prison behave to Joseph? He gave his entire charge of the prison. He made him the head jailer. He was the turnkey. What happened to two of the prisoners? Pharaoh's chief butler and chief baker had dreams which had troubled them. How did Joseph help them in the perplexity? He interpreted their dreams. Were his words found true? Yes, the chief butler was restored and the chief baker was hanged, as Joseph said. How did Pharaoh's butler behave to Joseph? he forgot his promise to ask his Joseph's release. What brought his dream again to his mind? A dream which Pharaoh had. Did Joseph take the honor of the interpretation himself? He said, no, if it's not in me, God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace. So, let's get started here. Genesis 39. Let's take a look. Verse 2. The Lord was with Joseph, and the Lord made good things happen to him, and Joseph lived in Potiphar's house. Well, okay, we know that part. The Lord was with this Joseph. Okay, Potiphar saw that too. Let me get past here. I got this on easy English instead of King James, but what we'll do here, we'll go to King James, and then if it gets kind of heavy with the Elizabethan language, we'll whip it over to English, or easy English. Okay, let me see. Let's just take it up here. And she caught him by his garment, Potiphar's wife, saying, lie with me. And of course, he fled and left the garment in his hand. And then she set this up in verse 14 with the servants to lie, to be agreement with her in that lie. And then she tells him the story in verse 15. And so let's start off in verse 20. And Joseph's master took him and put him into prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound, and he was there in the prison. Just wanted to bring out here, it says the king's prisoners. So these, like today, there's some people in prison, in different prisons, and they're political prisoners in other countries. So Joseph got put not with the common prisoners, but the prisoners, the king's prisoners were segregated, and he was in that area of the prison. And the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. You notice a progression here. Mercy came, and then favor comes. If listening to Paul's instruction, he says, therefore, let us boldly come to the throne of grace. The first one is to obtain mercy. Then you find grace for help in time of need. So you see the progression there, there's mercy, and then the favor is grace. So you obtain mercy, and then you find grace in time of need. Okay. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison, and whatsoever they did, he was the doer of it. The keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him, and that which he did, the Lord made it prosper. So if you make your boss look good to his boss, it's a good thing. Okay, Genesis 40. And it came to pass after these things that the butler of the king of Egypt and his baker had offended their lord, the king of Egypt, for different reasons. So Pharaoh was angry against two of his officers, against the chief of the butlers and against the chief of the bakers. Excuse me. And he put them in a ward in the house of the captain of the guard, and to the prison, the place where Joseph was bound. So there it goes back in that political part. And the captain of the guard, I guess you would call it federal prison. I don't know if y'all have ever been out there and did a little time. Let me talk about this a second. Federal prison is like a vacation when it comes to getting put in state prison, mainly because federal prisons have federal money and they're more accountable to the government, to the Department of Corrections. Therefore, if you get busted on a federal charge and you get busted on a state charge, a lot of times you'll find that the feds will drop their charge against you because they know you want to go to jail, but they don't want to pay the extra money. They're more select. The federal government's more select about who's they prosecute than over state prisoners. Because in state prisoners, like where I was in a place called Angola, Louisiana State Penitentiary at Angola. It was on a river, just like in the movie Cool Hand Luke. I lived like that for almost 3 years. I lived off and on a chain gang. And the chain gang, we didn't have that kind of a chain, but what we had a ditch bank blade. A ditch bank blade. I don't know if you ever watched that movie Sling Blade. He called it a Kaiser blade, and it's got a big long wood handle on it, and it's got a big blade, and they take you out there, and you, what I did, I had to cut down all the weeds. They got ragweed, and they got all kinds of different kind of weeds, you name it, careless weeds and stuff like that. And they take you down there with a crew, and you have a guy that sits on the horse, and he's got a shotgun or a rifle across his lap, and he sits there all day, and he sits there all day and watches you to make sure you don't run off. Well, in Angola, it's probably got the more land on it than any state prison in the country. I mean, it's big. They have what they call count. At the end of the day, count is a big thing in prison, because until the count is cleared, nobody goes anywhere. Okay, because they want everybody accounted for. And when they call out your name, you say yay, nay, or whatever. And then after that's done, you could finish out the rest of your day. And so when I first got to prison, I went to, they have like called satellites. It's little prisons around the big prison. And the big prison, they got a big fence, and that's called trustee, which means is you don't have a lot of time, so they're going to trust you a little bit, but they still keep a fence around you. And then they have what they call medium security, and these are the ones that are in there with life and got some real heavy charges, be convicted. They live, and their liberty is restricted more. So then you have what you call death row. It's called the row. Here's how it works. You pull in on a big bus, they chain you down, and they take you out of jail, and they put you on this bus, and everybody is going to the state prison, and they chain you up, and they chain you to the bus seat, and they got a guy with a machine gun standing at the front, and he stands there behind the driver and watches you until you arrive. When you get there, they put you in orientation. And it's a little building that does two things. It's called, it's where prisoners go till they find out how crazy you are, how sane you are. And then they see your charge, and then they assign you a job, and they assign you the place that you're going to start doing your time. And the other part of the orientation area, in another building, they've got death row and CCR. Well, death row is self-explanatory. That's them who are on the row. They can't get off, and they get exercise once a day and a shower maybe once a day, and they get to stroll around a little courtyard, and they go back in the jail. And another part of death row, they have CCR. I never knew what it stood for, but it's for the ones that are, it's called lockdown. It's for the ones that are so dangerous, and they're always killing either a guard or other convicts, that they have to lock them up. So they might as well be on death row because they can't get out, okay? And then as it moves out, then they take you out and they put you on, I found myself in the dairy. I was in a dairy that, I got my first job, I worked in a dairy with cows and everything, and I learned how to milk cows and carry their feed and all that stuff. And then that's called a camp. So these camps are little camps outside the fence of the minimum trustees, and they are, you're dotted. They have Camp A, Camp B, and people there selected. So that was my first stop. Then for some reason, I got transferred to the walk. That's the minimum security. And I got me a dormitory. I was in Camp A. And I mean, not Camp A, but they named them all after wood. I forget one. Mag, my mahogany or something. That was my Mag 4. That was my spot. And all of these dormitories, they spill out into this cement, raised up cement, and all the convicts, they come out and they walk on this cement pathway to the mess hall and places like that. Well, I'm going off too much already on my prison venture. I didn't mean to, but I kind of want to give you a feeling, if you haven't been there, a little bit how it is. But I started off talking about political prisoners and federal prisoners. And so they have state prisoners. So Joseph here was put in with political prisoners, the king's prisoners. And then federal, and so if you do a federal crime, you get busted, you do federal time. And they, as far as I know, I don't think they have parole. If you get 5 years, you do 5 years. And so you find yourself in federal prison, and because they have more money and there's less people in there, they're able to take care of you better, if that's what you want to call it. So their meals are better, their recreation things are better. It's just better to do federal time. So if you ever get busted or you're sitting there listening to this and you have a chance to do federal time and you know you got to go up the river, get them to take up that federal charge. Have them drop the states, plead out to the federal. You'll be glad you did. So anyway, so feds are better because they got more money, and states, they're terrible. They don't have any money, so they get away with murder, actually literal murder. Yeah, I'll tell you some prison stories someday, and good and the bad and the ugly. But anyway, let's get back to our text for today. All right? Okay, here we go. And the captain of the guard charged Joseph with him, and he served him, and they continued a season in ward. And they dreamed a dream, both of them, each man his dream in one night. Each man according to the interpretation of his dreams, the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt, which were bound in prison. I just want to let you know, Daniel himself, when he was a political prisoner kind, he went and got under Nebuchadnezzar, and one of the gifts that Daniel had was the gift of dreams and the gift of interpretation. It was a specific gift that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they did not have that gift, but Daniel did. So today, some of you might have that gift, but it's a gift that operates, and it only operates when the dream means something spiritually and it's going to be pertinent to the future. Okay. So he asked Pharaoh's officers that were with him in the ward of his lord's house, saying, "Wherefore, why are you looking so sad today?" And they said to him, "We have dreamed a dream, and there's no interpreter." And Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me then, I pray you." Well, the chief butler told his dream to Joseph. In my dream, he says, a vine was before me, and in the vine were 3 branches, and it was though it was budded, and her blossoms shot forth, and the cluster thereof brought forth ripe grapes. And Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup. I gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand. And Joseph said to him, "This is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thine head, and restore thee into thy place. And thou shalt deliver Pharaoh's cup into his hand, after the former manner which thou wast his butler." So he's getting out. Okay. He says, so Joseph, this is very important. You tell this to a lot of people that are rolling out around you if you're in jail. You'll say, "Do this for me and do this for me. Call so-and-so," because you're trying to get out. And you're not in prison yet, but you're in jail trying to make bonds. So all these people are rolling out you'll say, hey man, remember me when you get out, go do this, call so-and-so, see how they're doing. And most of them say, okay, I'll take care of that for you. But you know what? They forget you. They forget you. I remember when I got out on jail, I was in and out of jail all the time, and I didn't hear from nobody except my girls when I was in jail. But when I got out, hey man, where you been? What's going on? Yeah, I was going to come see you. They're going to tell you all that crap. But you just got to accept it. That's the way street people are. Okay, we were. For indeed, I was stolen out of the land of the Hebrews. So he's telling the jailer, the guy that works for the king, he says, hey man, you're going to have the ear of the king. Please tell him. So he's filing an appeal. He's filing an appeal with the guy that's getting out and is going back to be serving in Pharaoh's court. He says, tell him I got stolen out of the land of the Hebrews. Here also I have done nothing that you put me into prison. He's saying I'm innocent. I'm a victim. When the chief baker saw that the interpretation was good, he said to Joseph, I also was in my dream, and I had 3 white baskets on my head. So the other guy had the dream. He tells him his dream. It says, they were baked meats for Pharaoh, and the birds did eat them out of the basket upon my head. And Joseph answered and said, this is the interpretation thereof. It doesn't say how long it takes Joseph to interpret this, but apparently here it looks like he's doing it for just instantly. He says, the 3 baskets are 3 days. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thy head from off thee, oh man, and shall hang thee on a tree, and the birds shall eat thy flesh from off thee. Well, I can imagine this guy didn't want to believe that interpretation. So it came to pass the 3rd day, when Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast to all the servants, and he lifted up the head of the chief butler and the chief baker among his servants. Wow. Now, so it means he hung him on his birthday. This reminds me of, is it Herod? During Jesus' day, and John the Baptist got his head on the charger. He threw a feast. Let me see here. Herod threw a feast, and John the Baptist was in jail. And so he wanted to make big show, so he had eyes for his wife's daughter, and she did a dance. You all know about the dance, and got him all turned on and everything. And so he says, well, whatever you want after the dance, he says, I'm going to give it to you up until the half of my kingdom. So she goes back to her mother and says, I got him primed and ready. What do you want to do? She says she wants to get her revenge of John humiliating her for living a sinful life with her husband there, Herod. So she's able to get her revenge. So she says, tell him you want John's head in a charger on a platter. So she went back, and during this big feast, he gave her what she wanted. So they went and snatched up John, cut off his head, and brought it, and there it was. What an ugly, ugly gift for Herod's, not a gift, I couldn't say it was a gift, but what a souvenir that he must have displayed as she walked around. I can just imagine the scene. They're having a good time, and all of a sudden, they hear her make that request, and they see some activity. They see a messenger go out from the feast, and next thing you know, there's a knock at the door, and the king bends over, and he hears the message, and he waves them in, okay? And here comes John's head on a charger, like that. And I guess the king wanted to make a big deal. He said he really liked John, but he gave his word, so he didn't want to be humiliated in front of his friends. So I guess he had him take the platter and parade it all up and down from all those people who were eating, not that that would go good with your food. And that was a terrible, bloody thing, Poor John. Poor John. But God said, among them born of women, there was none better than John the Baptist. So I wanted to bring that up because here, in this case, it didn't work out for him this way. He got hung on not a feast. Part of the feast was hanging this guy for some reason. Pharaoh delighted in that, And so they hung him on the Pharaoh's birthday. Wow. But the first one, he says, and he restored the chief butler into his butlership again. He got his old job back, and he gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker, as Joseph had interpreted them. Yet did not the chief butler remember Joseph, but forgave him. And it came to pass at the end of 2 years, after 2 years that passed away, and after 2 years Pharaoh had a dream, and as he stood by the river. And before I get into that, because of my little prison testimony, I think we're going to stop here. And tomorrow we'll pick it up where he invites Joseph. Finds out about Joseph from the guy that interpreted the dream, tells Pharaoh, says, I know somebody in jail, a Hebrew. He might be able to answer your dream. And it goes on from there. And we'll talk about that tomorrow. So that's all I have for you today. And so I'm a little earlier today than usual, but I went to bed early last night. So I wish above all things that you would prosper and be in good health, even as your soul is prospering. So you have a blessed day, and we'll pick up this story tomorrow at the Kitchen Bible study here on the Hill, Mars Hill that is, in good old Naptown, Indianapolis, Indiana. Grace be with you and peace from my Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. We're out. Bye-bye.